Alright, this is our third video we have to help us with our budgeting project. This video is going to help us finalize our expense tracking. Okay, so if you're starting this video, then you should be done categorizing all the expenses for January, February, and March. So now what we need to do is tally up all these categories for all 3 months. Before I show you how to do this, some of you might be looking at this and saying, oh, awesome, I've got the answers for February. I can just copy all this down and I'll be done. Well, that's wrong. I changed some of the numbers in anticipation of that. I know most of you wouldn't think about cheating. Some of you might. But if you're tempted to try to do that, if you're tempted to copy all this down, if you do, it'll just be wrong. So don't do it. Alright. So I want to go ahead and start with the flexible expenses. If you notice I'm doing February here. This is just an example. You don't need to start with February. It's just I chose to do this one to mix it up a little bit. I start with the flexible expenses because we have more expenses there. So you notice with the fixed expenses, there's only one expense per month. Alright, and that's across the board. That's every month. There should only be one expense per month. If you have more than one fixed expense in a month, you've done something wrong. Okay, so there's an indicator if you mess something up. The flexible expenses, there's going to be a lot more. Now notice that in some categories there's 0, some categories there's 1, and with dining out and coffee and some of the other categories there's a lot. Alright, so some of these categories are very simple to add up. They're either 0 or that first number. But a couple of them need to be added up. And there's a very simple way to do this with Excel. That's why I chose to do this project in Excel, is because all we need to do is, there's a little magic button up here called auto sum, and if you click on the little right arrow there, there's a lot of things you can do with this auto sum. If you get into Miss Hipkins' class next year, or maybe in a math class, they might teach you how to do this, or they'll definitely teach you how to do it up at the high school. But there's all kinds of mathematical equations that you can do here when you get into it. Alright, but we just need the add aspect, or the sum aspect, because that's what we're trying to do. We're going to sum up all this information. So what you do to use this feature is you want to highlight all the fields that you want to add. Now there's a very specific way you need to do this, and just go ahead and copy what I do to make it easy. We could do this one row at a time, just like that. Alright, and do that for every row, but there's actually an even easier way to do it. So we're going to use that method rather than doing it one row at a time. To do this, and just follow the way that I like to do it, it's a very specific method, but it'll work. I always like to go 2 rows below the lowest entry, which would be dining out. That's the one that goes down first. Go 2 below that, and highlight all the way over to the farthest column that we have, which would be other entertainment. Okay, that's the area that you want to highlight. So for February, and it might change from month to month, but for February at least, we want to go down to row 28 and all the way over to column N. Alright, and all we got to do is hit auto sum. Alright, and that gives us all of our totals for each category. As you see, videos, CDs are left blank. Car maintenance is 54, nice and easy. And then those are, you can do the math, you can double check if you want to, but those are right. Okay, auto sum is very rarely incorrect. It does the job. So the next thing we want to do is we want to actually add up all these totals here. Okay, so we're going to go across, and I like to take it out. Once again, it's always nice just to go 2 rows past the last entry. That's the method that I'd like to use. Okay, and we're going to hit auto sum again. Okay, that gives us our number right there. We spent $998 of our $3,000 in a month on our flexible expenses. Okay, so our flexible expenses are done. They're all totaled up. So now what we need to do is go up to our fixed expenses and add all those up. Now we don't need to subtotal those because there's only one entry per month. So all we need to do is start here, drag across, and line it up with your flexible total. Alright, so that when we hit auto sum, they will be in the same column. Alright, the last step we need to do is add our fixed and flexible expenses to get our total spending for that month. Now this gets slightly complicated, but not too bad. One of the issues is, and I don't know why Excel won't do this properly, but if we highlight both those numbers and hit auto sum like we had before, it doesn't give us the number. It gives us that number, and that's obviously not right. Alright, it hasn't added in the 2100. There's two solutions to this. First, you can just get out a good old-fashioned calculator and do some math. Alright, that's probably the simplest way, and you can go ahead and just write in the number. I won't mark you off for that at all. The other thing's a little more technical. If you know anything about Excel, you know that sum function that I talked about earlier, the auto sum, works because of a formula we put into the cell, and that formula is right here. And I don't know why, like I said, but for some reason it only wants to calculate from 14 down, so it only calculates that 998. Alright, well, what we can do is we can change that formula to include cell P6, and then it will add P6 to P28 when we get our total. So what we would have to do right here is change this from P14, delete that, and change it to 6, hit enter, and then it gives us our total. Alright, so that's a method that you can use if you'd like to, if you want to do the little more technical aspect of it. But if you just want the easier method, I would say just take 2100 plus $998.44. Alright, and that gives us the total spending for that month. Alright, as you can see, we went over our $3,000. That's an issue for them. You need to do this for all 3 months. And what I'm going to look at when I grade this is I'm going to look at this number to make sure it's right. I'm going to look at this number to make sure it's right. And I'm going to look at that total there to make sure that's right. And I'm going to make sure that you auto-summed everything. Alright. To help you out, I went ahead and entered in these 3 numbers. Alright. These are the totals that you need to get, the total amount that you need to show that you spent at the end of each month. Alright, so if you tabulate all of January and you don't get $3,086.51, then you've done something wrong and you need to go back and find that mistake. Alright, that's why I absolutely stress to you guys that when you're categorizing your expenses, you do it slowly, you do it accurately, you do it deliberately so you don't make any mistakes, because going back and let's say you're off $3, it's going to be a real pain in the butt. Alright, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so at the end of each month when you get your total here, make sure they jive up with these numbers. I'll put these up on the board for you as well, or you can come back in this video and look at it either way. Those numbers need to match up. Alright, and that should wrap it up for explaining our expense tracking. When you're done with this, you'll be ready to move on to the budget. If you have any questions, if you're unsure of anything, feel free to ask me for help.